Hi, everyone. First off, I just want to say I miss you, but we are going to talk about post-war boom. So this is going to be directly after World War II. And remember that when we say boom, we don't mean explosion, we mean economic growth. So the goal of this area is to talk about all of the economic great things that are happening. So, first thing to kind of want to take a look at, after World War II, there was a housing shortage, but they started building more homes. They could actually build one home in 16 minutes, and it only cost $7,000. That doesn't sound like a lot of money to us. We're looking at probably around at least $50,000 today to kind of make that for the equivalent. So, this is when the suburbs were born. So, this is going to be places to live right outside the cities. Families start to go back to normal. They are not focusing on the war anymore. And now we have workforce conflicts because all of the women were told, okay, the World War II is happening, the men are at war, you need to come in and work in the factory. So the women came to work in factories. After that, they told women, the men are back from war. It's time for you to go home and get back into the kitchen where you belong. And a lot of women had a hard time with that. They wanted to help raise money for their family. Some of them really enjoyed their jobs. There was a lot of competition for jobs between men and women. Oftentimes, men and women who work the same job, men were paid at least 50% more than women. And that still goes on today in 2020. For every $1 that a man makes, on average, women only make 77 cents. So this is something that's still going on today. They're going to have high divorce rates. Basically, you had a lot of young people who were saying they were madly in love at the beginning of World War II. When they would come home, their husbands were just different people. They had experienced war. A lot of them suffered from PTSD, which is post traumatic stress disorder. So basically, everyday events for them reminded them of the war, and they really struggled with that. But if you were a soldier returning home, you got a GI Bill, which is basically a low interest loan from the government. So that a lot of the World War II veterans could buy homes in the suburbs and try to get back to a normal, happy life. So when we're looking at economic recovery, so remember that in World War II, up until the start of World War II, we were in the Great Depression. Now, World War II ended the Great Depression. And here's basically what happened. The government told everyone, you need to save your money. During the Great Depression, the United States as a whole saved $135 billion. They saved that by investing in war bonds, in not spending money on other goods. They actually told people, don't go out and buy a fancy new game for your children. Save that money because we might need it for the war effort. People who were working defense jobs, all of the weapons that we sold to Europe to defeat Hitler, we saved money on that. We made money on that. So we actually pull ourselves out of the Great Depression that way. And Americans are ready to buy consumer goods after World War II, which means they're ready to buy stuff. If you look at this picture, the first telephones, the picture in the upper left-hand corner, if you've never seen a landline before, that's what one looks like. They were buying refrigerators, washing machines, blenders, radios. Their version of a CD player was like what's that thing called? A record, like a disc, a record player. So they were buying those types of things. This really big blocky thing next to the hair dryer, that is one of the first versions of a cell phone, if you can believe it or not. Imagine carrying that in your pocket and trying to sneak and text in class with that thing. You couldn't even text back then. So when President Truman takes over, he is dealing with a lot of people who are going on strike. Basically, when workers are coming back from the war, they're asking to be treated better. And Truman is not about striking. He thinks that striking, remember, is when you say, I'm not going to work until you give me a better paying wage or better living condition. Truman says, no, if you threatened to strike. What I'm going to do, men, is I'm going to draft you into the military. I'm going to force you to become a soldier. And then as a soldier, I'm going to send you to work. And that is something that they couldn't refuse. Otherwise, they would have been arrested and imprisoned. So Truman is really holding tight on the reins here. He does not want any of that to be going on in the US. This strategy worked. A lot of people said, okay, Truman, whatever, we'll go back to our jobs, we'll do what we need to do. He wins the election and he gets to hold up this newspaper. It's kind of like a joke for him, like, haha, you thought I was going to lose, but I really won. So that's just kind of about that election. So we move on through Truman's office. The next president to take over after Truman is a guy named Ike Eisenhower. His first name is actually Dwight, but they call him Ike as a nickname. If you're looking at this map, everything in blue, those are all the states that voted for Eisenhower. Everything in yellow was his opponent, Stevenson. So Ike won by a pretty. And here are the things that Ike does well. So he balances a budget. What that means is the US government is not spending more money than they're making. So that was his first goal, and he did that really well. He also raises the minimum wage. So this is the minimum amount of money that we are allowed to charge someone to work. He extends Social Security and unemployment benefits. So unemployment is something that's hitting the US right now in 2020 really hard because a lot of people have been put out of their job because of COVID-19. They're not allowed to go to work. So unemployment benefits basically are a government-run area where people who have been laid off or fired from their jobs can request money from the government. And the government gives them this money to help them make sure they can pay their bills and feed their families until it's time for them to go back to work or until they get a new job. And Social Security, I know we've talked about in class before, but everyone, when you start getting into your paychecks, if you're 16 or if you're 52, the Social Security takes money out and they put money into a bank account with your name on it. And when you hit 65, you are given access to this bank account and they will cut you a check for a certain amount of money every month. Now, if you're thinking, well, what happens if I die before I turn 65? It goes to your husband or wife. What happens if my husband and wife die with me? It goes to your kids. What happens if you don't have a husband, a wife, or kids? That money is going to be redistributed or re-put into everyone else's bank account. So if you are unmarried and have no children, you cannot sign it over to your best friend, Joe. It will go right back to the government. Another thing he does is increased funding for public housing. So this is money that the government gives anyone for buying a house. Or it could also be money that the government uses to help low-income families find housing. He also creates an interstate highway system, which is basically just roads that connect one state to another. Now, that might not seem like the most amazing and interesting thing in the whole world, but before that, they really didn't have roads that you could take to get from Ohio to Kentucky or even Ohio all the way out to California. So this becomes kind of the start of road trips. An interesting thing, if you're driving down the highway on 71 or 70, every 5 miles you will reach a 1 mile stretch of straight land. Eisenhower did that on purpose because he was kind of a paranoid guy and he was a preparer. And he wanted to basically say, if anyone ever tries to invade the United States, we need to be ready as a military to fight back. So that 1 mile stretch of straight land is actually where you can land aircraft carriers for planes in the military. Also, like planes that you would take on a vacation, those planes can be landed on that strip of road too. So that's a little interesting fact there. At least I find it interesting. His misses over here in the right-hand column, things that he didn't do so well. He tries to avoid controversy, and controversy is the idea that he Ike Eisenhower wants everyone to like him, and he does not want to be an unliked president. And because of that, he sometimes will take steps to make sure that he is still viewed as liked. He doesn't want to make any extreme decisions. He wants everyone to like him. Very different from our current president, who doesn't care if people like him or not like him. Now, something that we talk about in one of the readings that I gave you is the Little Rock High School crisis. So in Little Rock, Arkansas, they are trying to get 9 African American students to attend an all-white high school. And what was happening is when these 9 students showed up to go to high school, they were stopped from entering the building by an armed, angry mob. The white people in Arkansas did not want to integrate their schools. And Eisenhower did not want to force Little Rock to have to integrate. He wanted to avoid this entire thing because he didn't want to be seen as the bad guy. Well, sometimes you have to be seen as the bad guy, and he was actually forced to intervene, and the 9 students got armed military escorts to class. From class to class, the soldiers even went into the bathroom with the students, not in the stall, in the bathroom, because the students weren't safe on their own. Brown versus Board, which you did a reading on, is a court case that says separate is not equal. Basically, there were schools that were all white schools and all black schools. Brown versus Board says that's not okay. We need to have a school where everyone is together. Rosa Parks, if you don't know who Rosa Parks is, she is the black woman who was told to get off of the seat that she was sitting in and give it up for a white person. She refused, which led to a bus boycott for the integration of buses. And Ike Eisenhower was not really a big supporter. He didn't do things to end segregation, so ending the separation of whites and blacks. Other things, we've got this idea of the American dream.